In December of 2022, search and rescue teams in the remote mountains of Aspen, Colorado, found something that defied all logic. They found a cabin surrounded by blood, 47 spent shotgun shells, and footprints in the snow that measured 18 inches across. Tracks that belonged to creatures that shouldn't exist outside of nightmares. Inside that cabin lived Elena Cross, a 24-year-old woman who had been exiled from her society 2 years prior. She didn't have a weapon. She didn't have a pack. She didn't even have electricity. But she had a secret. 72 hours before the rescue teams arrived, she had dragged 11 dying wolves out of a blizzard and into her living room. Massive beasts, each one weighing over 300 pounds. She thought she was saving wildlife. She had no idea she was actually nursing the AlphaKing and his royal guard back to life. And she certainly had no idea that the killers who poisoned them were coming back to finish the job. This is the story of the Blackwood Ridge incident. The story of how a broken Omega became a queen. The story of 6.2 miles between life and death. The thermometer on the porch of the Blackwood Ridge cabin read negative 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind chill pushed it closer to negative 50. Cold that turns exposed skin black in minutes. Cold that kills. Elena Cross shouldn't have been outside. As a dormant Omega, she lacked the thermal regulation of a full-blooded werewolf. Her body temperature ran 2 degrees cooler than normal humans. In this weather, hypothermia could set in within 20 minutes. But the generator was dying, and if she didn't fix it soon, she would freeze to death in her sleep. So she wrapped 3 scarves around her face, pulled on 2 pairs of wool socks inside her boots, and stepped out into the screaming wind. The blizzard hit her with physical force. Snow horizontal visibility 3 feet. The Weather Service had called it a level 5 storm. Whiteout conditions. Winds sustained at 60 miles per hour. They'd warned everyone to stay indoors. But Elena was alone on this mountain. There was no one to warn. She'd been alone for 2 years now. 730 days since the Silver River Pack had exiled her. Since they decided she was too broken to keep. The memories surfaced as she trudged toward the generator shed. December 2020, the council meeting. Alpha Riley standing at the head of the table looking at her with something between pity and disgust. Dormant Omegas are liabilities, Elena. We've been patient. We've given you time. But you're 22 years old and you've never shifted, not once. The pack doctor says your wolf is dead, a genetic defect from your cursed bloodline. She'd wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself. But the words died in her throat when she saw the others nodding. Her own pack, people she'd grown up with, all agreeing that she was defective, broken, useless. You have 24 hours to leave Silver Shiver territory. If you're still here tomorrow night, we'll remove you by force. That had been the diplomatic version. What they didn't say in the council meeting, they'd made clear in the weeks leading up to it. They'd moved her out of the Omega housing and into the kennels, made her sleep in a dog cage for 3 months, fed her table scraps, beaten her when she tried to speak up. The worst part wasn't the physical abuse. It was the doctor's diagnosis, the clinical confirmation of what she'd always feared. Her wolf is dead, Alpha Riley. I've run every test. There's nothing there, just an empty space where the spirit should be. It's her grandmother's fault. That cursed Silver Luna bloodline. Everyone knows what happened to them. Everyone did know. 100 years ago, the Silver Lunas had been royalty, healers with the power to cure entire armies. But the other packs had feared that power. In 1922, 5 allied packs had hunted down and assassinated every Silver Luna they could find. Grandmother Arya had been the last, murdered in her sleep. The bloodline had been considered extinct. Until Elena was born with her grandmother's face and her grandmother's curse. She reached the generator shed and pried open the frozen door. Her fingers were already numb inside her gloves. The generator coughed, sputtered, died. She checked the fuel line, frozen solid. "Come on," she whispered to the machine. "Don't do this, not tonight." But the generator didn't care about her pleading. It was dead, which meant no heat, no light, no running water when the pipes froze. She'd survived 2 years in this cabin, but those 2 years had cost her everything. When she'd arrived in December 2020, she'd weighed 128 pounds. Now she weighed 107. 21 pounds lost to starvation, cold, and loneliness. She ate 1 meal a day when she was lucky. Oatmeal stretched with melted snow. Canned vegetables from the supplies she'd scavenged. On good days, she trapped a rabbit. On bad days, she went hungry. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair brittle and thin. Her hands shook constantly from malnutrition. When she looked in the cracked mirror above the bathroom sink, she barely recognized herself. But she was alive. That had to count for something. She was about to head back inside when the wind shifted, and she smelled it. Copper, hot and metallic. fresh blood steaming in freezing air. Elena's dormant wolf might have been silent, but some instincts ran deeper than shifting. The smell of blood triggered something primal in her hindbrain, a warning, a pull. She turned toward the tree line, squinting through the blizzard. She couldn't see more than a few feet, but the smell was getting stronger. Something was bleeding out there, bleeding badly. Bear, she whispered to herself, had to be. Black bears sometimes wandered this high in winter, desperate and starving. She should go inside, lock the door, let nature take its course. But her feet were already moving toward the trees, toward the blood. She found the first body 50 yards from the cabin. At first, she thought it was a fallen log, black and massive, half buried in a snowdrift. But when she brushed away the snow, she saw fur. Matted, blood-soaked fur. It wasn't a bear, it was a wolf, but not a normal timber wolf. This creature was the size of a small horse, 7 feet from nose to tail, shoulders 4 feet high, 300 pounds of muscle and bone. A shifter, a werewolf locked in animal form. Elena fell to her knees, her hands shaking as she pressed them against the wolf's chest, searching for a heartbeat. Please be alive, please. They were faint, thready, but there. The wolf's body temperature was plummeting, 94 degrees Fahrenheit, the threshold of severe hypothermia. Another hour in this cold and the heart would simply stop. She looked up, squinting through the snow, and that's when she saw them. They were scattered across the clearing like broken toys. 11 massive wolves, all of them down, all of them dying. They weren't curled up to preserve heat the way normal wolves would be. They dropped mid-stride as if struck by lightning. This wasn't natural. This was poison. Or a curse. Oh, God! Elena breathed. What happened to you? She knew she couldn't save them all. Not by herself, not in this storm. But she had to try. She couldn't just leave them to freeze. She grabbed the first wolf by its hind legs and pulled. The body didn't budge. 320 pounds of dead weight. Elena was 5'4" and weighed 107 pounds. She had a fractured rib on her left side that had never healed properly from when the Silver River enforcers had beaten her. She was starving, exhausted, and borderline hypothermic herself. But she pulled. The plastic sled she used for hauling firewood became a makeshift gurney. She rolled the first wolf onto it, a russet-colored male with a gash across his shoulder. Then she hauled, 50 yards through waist-deep snow, her boots slipping on ice, her lungs burning from the cold air, her muscles screaming. It took her 17 minutes to drag the first wolf to her cabin door. She went back for the second. The next 4 hours were a blur of agony. Elena didn't remember most of it clearly. She remembered the taste of bile in her throat. She remembered the sound of her own rib re-breaking when she slipped and fell with the fifth wolf on the sled. She remembered crying, sobbing from exhaustion, but not stopping. One by one she dragged them. The gray wolf with the scarred muzzle. The brown wolf missing half an ear. The white wolf with blue eyes. The twins, identical black wolves who'd fallen side by side. By the time she got to the 10th wolf, she couldn't feel her hands. Her fingers had gone from numb to burning to nothing at all. Frostbite, deep tissue damage. She'd probably lose at least 2 fingers. But she went back for the 11th. He was the furthest away, and he was the biggest. Jet black fur, darker than the night sky, with a white scar running diagonally across his muzzle. He had to weigh 350 pounds, maybe more. Even unconscious, he radiated power. An alpha, maybe the alpha. While the others had collapsed in chaos, this one had fallen facing the wind, positioned between the storm and the others, as if trying to shield them even as he died. When Elena touched his fur, something happened. A shock of static electricity, but magnified 100 times. It zapped through her hand, up her arm, straight into her chest. She gasped and jerked back. Her heart was pounding, her skin tingling where she touched him. A mate spark, that's what the old stories called it. The electric recognition between destined partners. But that was impossible. She was dormant, broken. She couldn't have a mate. "You're heavy," she grunted, forcing herself to focus. She grabbed his front legs and heaved his upper body onto the sled. "You are so damn heavy." It took her 43 minutes to drag him to the cabin, twice as long as any of the others. She had to stop 6 times to rest her vision, spotting with exhaustion. Her body was shutting down. Hypothermia. Blood loss from her rebroken rib. Severe dehydration. But she made it. She kicked the cabin door shut behind her and collapsed onto the floorboards, her chest heaving, her hands completely numb. 11 wolves now filled every inch of her small living room, wall-to-wall fur and blood and the smell of death. The fire in the hearth was the only thing keeping them from the eternal sleep. Elena lay on the floor staring at the ceiling. Her whole body was shaking. Not from the cold anymore. From shock. She just hauled 6.2 miles worth of weight through a blizzard. 11 trips of 50 yards each plus the distance between wolves. Her body had been running on pure adrenaline, and now that adrenaline was crashing hard. She tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She tried again. Fell. On the third attempt, she made it to her knees. The wolves were dying. She could see it. Their breathing was shallow, their gums pale gray when she checked them. Classic symptoms of poison. Wolfsbane. She recognized it from her time as a vet tech before the exile. But this wasn't normal wolfsbane. This was concentrated, modified. It had paralyzed them, locked them in their wolf forms, and was slowly shutting down their autonomic nervous systems. If she didn't act now, they'd be dead within the hour. Elena crawled to her kitchen cabinet and pulled out her medical supplies. Activated charcoal, saline solution, a turkey baster, needles and thread. She started with the charcoal slurry, mixed it with warm water, and forced it down their throats one by one using the baster. The charcoal would bind to the toxins, help flush them out. Then she started stitching wounds. But wolf hide was tough. Alpha hide was nearly impenetrable. She bent 3 needles trying to close the gash on the russet wolf's flank. The cabin smelled of wet dog iron and isopropyl alcohol, blood soaked into her grandmother's braided rugs. Rugs that were the only thing she had left from her old life. It was 3 in the morning when she finally sat down next to the massive black wolf, the Alpha. She'd saved him for last because he had no open wounds. He was just fading, his breathing irregular, his heartbeat weak. Elena soaked a cloth in warm water and began to wipe the grime from his muzzle. The white scar stood out stark against his black fur. As she cleaned his chest, her hand froze. There, hidden beneath matted fur, was a mark, not a tattoo, scar tissue branded deep into the flesh. A crest she recognized from history books, the Blackwood Royal Seal, a crowned wolf surrounded by silver vines. Her hands trembled as she traced the symbol. This wasn't just any alpha. This was royalty. Maybe even... No, she whispered. It can't be. She continued cleaning him, her mind racing. The violet eyes she'd glimpsed earlier, the scar across his jaw. The way the other wolves had fallen protecting him, she was looking at the AlphaKing himself. "You're the leader, aren't you?" she whispered. "You're the only one who didn't fall until everyone else was down." As she ran the cloth over his ears, his eyes snapped open. They weren't the brown or yellow eyes of a normal wolf. They were violet, a piercing electric violet that she'd only read about in history books. Royal bloodlines, the mark of the AlphaKings. Her heart stopped. This wasn't just an alpha. This was the AlphaKing, the ruler of the entire Western territories. A low, rumbling growl vibrated through his chest. It shook the floorboards. The sound of a predator. A killer. The sound that should have sent her running. But Elena was too tired to be afraid. "Oh, shut up," she said, dipping the cloth back in the water. "I just dragged your 300-pound ass through a blizzard. You don't get to growl at me until you pay rent." The violet eyes widened slightly. The growl cut off. He watched her, couldn't move. The poison still had his motor functions locked down. But his eyes followed her every movement as she checked the vitals of the other 10 wolves. As she threw logs on the fire until her hands were covered in soot. As she curled up in the armchair with a threadbare quilt shotgun across her lap, refusing to sleep. Inside the mind of the wolf, Darius Blackwood was screaming. He was trapped in his own body. A passenger in his own flesh. He remembered the ambush, the diplomatic meeting with the northern separatists that was supposed to ease tensions. His cousin Victor's smile, the taste of wine. Then his royal guard had started falling. Flint first, then Caleb, then Ryan. All 10 of his best warriors collapsing within seconds of each other. Nightshade X, a synthetic neurotoxin, illegal, lethal. Victor had used it. Darius had managed to drag his men into the cover of the trees before his own legs gave out. He'd resigned himself to death, accepted that Victor had won, that his treacherous cousin would take the throne, and there was nothing he could do about it. And then she appeared. A tiny, fragile thing, 5'4", maybe 100 pounds. She smelled of vanilla and pine smoke and something ancient that his wolf recognized even through the poison fog. She had no pack scent. A rogue. But no, she was too soft to be a rogue. Too gentle. Rogues were hard, vicious. This woman had cried while dragging him through the snow. Darius tried to mind link with his guards, the telepathic connection that bound pack members. But the poison had severed it. He was alone in his head for the first time in 32 years. He watched the woman doze off in the chair, The firelight danced across her face. She was exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises. Her hands raw and blistered from the cold. Her fingers black with frostbite. Why, Darius wondered. Why save us? You don't know who we are. If Victor finds you, he'll skin you alive. Around 5 in the morning, one of the wolves started convulsing. Caleb, the medic, his body seizing his head, banging against the floorboards. The woman was awake in an instant. She dropped the quilt and slid across the floor, grabbing Caleb's massive head to keep him from cracking his skull. Easy, easy, she cooed, her voice steady despite the chaos. I've got you. Ride it out. She held the convulsing beast for 10 minutes, stroking his fur, whispering nonsense words of comfort. When the seizure finally stopped, she slumped back against the wall, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked over at Darius. Your friend is tough, she told the black wolf. But the fever's breaking. That's good. She crawled over to Darius, close enough that he could snap her neck if he had control of his jaw. Instead, she rested her forehead against his massive shoulder. Please don't die, she whispered, her voice cracking. I've been alone out here for 2 years. I don't think I can handle burying 11 new friends. Something twisted in Darius's chest. Gratitude, possessiveness, awe. This woman had saved his life, saved his men, and she didn't even know their names. He focused all his willpower, fighting the paralysis, fighting the toxin in his veins. He needed to move, just an inch, just enough to show her he was there. Slowly, agonizingly, he moved his head, pressed his wet nose against her cheek. She pulled back, startled. Then a tired smile broke across her face. Good boy, she said, scratching him behind the ears. I am not a boy, Darius thought indignantly. I am a king. But as the sun began to rise over the snow-covered mountains, Darius realized he didn't want to be a king right now. He just wanted to be the thing keeping this brave, foolish woman warm. Then he heard it, a sound that cut through the morning silence. Engines, snowmobiles, coming up the mountain. The woman stood up, her face going pale. She rushed to the window. Who comes up here in a storm? She whispered. Darius's blood ran cold. He knew who. Victor had come to check the bodies, to make sure the job was finished. And if he found them alive, he'd finish it. The roar of the engines grew louder. 3 snowmobiles cutting through the fresh snow, leaving deep tracks. The woman, Elena, didn't panic. Panic was a luxury for people who lived in cities with police forces and cell reception. She turned to the 11 wolves filling her living room. Their eyes were wide, fixed on her. They could hear the engines too. The fierce scent coming off them was sharp and acrid. Stay quiet, she hissed, though she knew they couldn't bark even if they wanted to. She grabbed a heavy wool blanket and threw it over Darius, obscuring his distinctive violet eyes. Then she grabbed her double-barreled shotgun from the mantel. It was loaded with rock salt, meant for scaring off coyotes, not killing. But the men outside didn't need to know that. She stepped out onto the porch just as 3 snowmobiles cut their engines in her front yard. Silence slammed back into the valley. Heavy, oppressive. 3 men dismounted. They wore expensive tactical winter gear, all black, no insignias. They moved with the fluid grace of shifters, predators. The leader, a man with a buzz cut and a scar through his left eyebrow, stepped forward. He sniffed the air. Morning, darling, he called out, his voice smooth as oil on water. Bit far out for a little lady all by herself, isn't it? Elena cocked the shotgun. The clack-clack sound echoed crisply in the cold air. I'm not by myself, she lied, keeping her face blank. My husband's inside cleaning his rifle, and we don't like trespassers. The man chuckled, but his eyes were scanning the perimeter, looking for something. Blood trails, drag marks. The blizzard had covered most of it, but had she missed a spot, Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. We're looking for some lost douceurs, the man said, taking a step toward the stairs. Whole pack of them. Dangerous, rabid. We're here to put them down for public safety. Haven't seen them, Elena said. Now get off my land. The man stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He sniffed again. His eyes narrowed. He could smell it. The blood. The wolves. 11 of them packed inside. You smell like wet dog, darling, he sneered. An iron. Why don't you put the toy gun down and let us take a look inside? He signaled to the 2 men behind him. They started to flank the cabin. Inside, Darius was fighting a war within his own cells. He could hear every word. He knew that voice. Garrett Stone, one of Victor's lieutenants. A butcher. If Garrett got past Elena, he'd put a bullet in every wolf's head before they could blink. Move, Darius commanded his body. Move, damn you. The paralysis was fading, but agonizingly slowly. He could twitch his tail, flex his claws, but he couldn't stand. Outside, the situation exploded. One of the flanking men tried to vault onto the side porch. Elena didn't hesitate. She spun and fired. Boom! The rock salt spray hit the man square in the chest. It wouldn't kill a werewolf, but it stung like hell. The force knocked him backward into a snowdrift. I said leave, Elena screamed. Garrett snarled, his human face contorted as his wolf surfaced, yellow bleeding into his eyes. He lunged up the stairs, moving faster than humanly possible. He slapped the shotgun out of Elena's hands. It went flying into the snow. Then his gloved hand was around her throat, pinning her against the cabin wall. Elena gagged, clawing at his grip. She couldn't breathe. Where are they? Garrett growled, his eyes glowing yellow. I know they're in there. Give them up, and I'll make your death quick. Elena's vision spotted, darkness creeping in at the edges, but her hand found her pocket, the flare gun she kept for emergencies. She didn't aim at Garrett. She aimed at the fuel tank of the nearest snowmobile. Pop. Hiss. The red flare arced through the air, struck the leaking gas cap. K-boom. The explosion was deafening. A fireball 40 feet in diameter. The shock wave threw Garrett and Elena onto the deck. Black smoke billowed into the sky. Fire, one of the other men shouted. The fuel's going to blow the trees. Garrett scrambled up, looked at the burning wreck, then at Elena, who was coughing on the floorboards, reaching for a knife in her boot. We have to go, his subordinate yelled. The smoke will draw the rangers. We can't be caught here. Garrett looked at the cabin door, 10 feet away from finishing the job. But the explosion was loud. Mountain rangers tracked smoke instantly. If they were caught poaching on protected land, Victor's whole plan would be exposed. This isn't over. Garrett spat at Elena. He pulled a photo from his pocket and threw it at her feet. Tonight we bring 20 wolves, and we'll burn this cabin down with you inside it. They scrambled onto the remaining 2 snowmobiles and tore off down the mountain. Elena lay on the deck for a full minute, shaking. She touched her throat, already bruising. 4 fingerprints, dark purple against her pale skin. She crawled back inside and locked the door, slid the deadbolt, dragged a heavy oak dresser in front of it. Then she turned to the wolves. They were all awake now. All 11 pairs of eyes locked on her with an intensity that made the air feel electric. They're coming back, she whispered, her voice raspy from the choking. We have to get you up. I don't care if it hurts. You have to wake up. She collapsed against Darius's side, buried her face in his neck. Please, she sobbed, wake up. And that's when she felt it. Heat. Darius's body wasn't just warm anymore. It was burning, his muscles spasming, rippling under the black fur. The poison had metabolized. The adrenaline of the attack had burned through the final traces. The shift was coming. The sound of a werewolf shifting is not pleasant. It's the sound of bones breaking and reforming, joints popping, skin stretching, ligaments snapping. It started with Caleb. A low moan filled the room. His body arched, spine cracking audibly. His fur receded, melting back into skin. His snout shortened. Elena scrambled back, pressing herself against the fireplace. She'd grown up in a pack. She'd seen shifts before, but she'd never seen 11 grown males shift at the same time. It was chaos, a symphony of groans and cracking bones. Within 5 minutes, the living room floor was no longer covered in wolves. It was covered in 11 naked, shivering, incredibly muscular men. They were disoriented, gasping for air, their skins slick with the sweat of transformation. Battered, covered in bruises and the healing marks where Elena had stitched them. Status, a deep voice commanded from the center of the room. Elena froze. The voice came from where the black wolf had been. Slowly, a man stood up. He was huge, easily 6'6", broad shoulders that tapered down to a V-shape. His hair was black and messy, falling over his eyes. The white scar she'd seen on the wolf now ran across his jawline, but it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Violet, the color of royalty. He stood fully nude, unashamed, radiating power that made the air crackle. Flint, he barked. The man who'd been the gray wolf sat up, rubbing his temples. Alive, Alpha. Headache from hell, but alive. Ryan. Here. Caleb. Here, sir. One by one, they sounded off. All 11. Alive. The violet-eyed man turned slowly. His gaze locked onto Elena. She was huddled by the fireplace, clutching a fire poker, wearing oversized wool socks and a blood-stained flannel shirt. She looked terrified. The man took a step toward her. Stay back, Elena warned, brandishing the poker. I don't care how naked you are. I'll hit you. The man paused. A corner of his mouth twitched upward, amusement. You saved us, he said. His voice was gravel and velvet. You dragged 11 fully shifted warriors out of a blizzard, alone. I thought you were wildlife, Elena stammered. I didn't know you were people. The room went silent. The other men stared at her. You're a werewolf, the man noted, sniffing the air, but dormant, no wolf scent. I'm an Omega, Elena snapped. Exiled. So technically I'm nobody, and I want you all out of my house before those men come back. The man shook his head. We can't leave. Not yet. My men are weak. We need weapons. We need a plan. That's not my problem, Elena yelled, the stress finally breaking her composure. I just blew up a snowmobile. I have a bruised trachea, and I have 11 naked strangers in my living room. I am having a very bad day. The man stepped closer, ignoring the fire poker. He stopped just inches from her, towering over her. The heat radiating off him was overwhelming. You are not nobody, he said softly. He reached out. Elena flinched, but he didn't strike her. He gently touched the bruising on her neck where Garrett had grabbed her. A spark, literal static electricity. It zapped between his fingers and her skin. Elena gasped. The man's eyes widened. You felt that, he whispered. Not a question. Static, Elena said breathlessly. From the rug. No. The man leaned down, his face close to hers. That wasn't the rug. He stepped back, turned to his men. Grab whatever clothes you can find. Blankets, curtains. I don't care. Cover up. Who are you? Elena asked, her voice trembling. The man grabbed a throw blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around his waist. He turned back to her, his expression grim. I am Darius Blackwood. Elena dropped the fire poker. It clattered loudly on the stone hearth. Darius Blackwood, the AlphaKing, ruler of the entire Western Territories. The man rumors said killed his own father to take the throne. The most dangerous predator on the continent, and was standing in her living room, wearing her grandmother's quilt. The king, she whispered. And those men, Darius said, walking to the window to peer out at the gathering darkness. Work for my cousin Victor. He thinks I'm dead. He's probably planning his coronation right now. Darius turned back to Elena. The look in his eyes was terrifyingly intense. You are the only reason I'm alive, little Omega. Which means you are now the most valuable asset in this kingdom, and also the most hunted. I don't want to be an asset, Elena said. I just want to be left alone. Too late, Darius's voice was iron. When Garrett comes back tonight, he won't be coming with 3 men. He'll be coming with a kill squad. We need to fortify this cabin, now. He looked at his men. Flint checked the perimeter. Ryan, see if there are weapons in this house other than a fire poker. We hold this ground until dawn. Yes, Alpha, the men shouted in unison. Darius looked down at Elena. What's your name, Elena? She squeaked. Elena Cross. Well, Elena Cross, Darius said, a dark promise in his voice. Welcome to the Royal Guard. Try not to get killed. The sun dropped behind the mountains, plunging the bone into an ink-black darkness deepened by the returning snow clouds. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Elena's cozy sanctuary had been transformed into a kill box. Push the sofa against the front door, Darius commanded. He was wearing a pair of Elena's oversized sweatpants that sat low on his hips and a flannel shirt that strained at the seams across his massive chest. It looked ridiculous, but nobody was laughing. The sheer aura of command rolling off him was terrifying. The 10 royal guards, still pale and shaky from the residual poison, moved with practiced efficiency. They were weak, but they were elite soldiers. What do you have for weapons? Darius asked, his violet eyes scanning the room for defensible angles. Elena went to a floorboard under her bed and pried it loose. Not much, but I prepared for bears. She pulled out a Remington 870 tactical shotgun and a hunting crossbow with a quiver of bolts. Flint, the demolition expert, whistled appreciatively. Decent hardware for a dormant. I also have propane tanks in the shed, Elena added, her voice shaking slightly. And fertilizer for the garden. Darius looked at her. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. Flint, go with her. Rig the perimeter. If they want a war, let's give them a minefield. For the next hour, they worked in frantic silence. Windows were boarded up with shelving units. Furniture was arranged into barricades. Kitchen knives were taped to broom handles to create spears. Elena watched these men, these warriors, turn her home into a fortress. And she felt something shift inside her. For 2 years, she'd been alone, invisible, forgotten. Now she was the center of everything. Flint showed her how to rig the propane tanks. Bury them 6 inches deep, 30 yards out. He explained, his scarred hands moving quickly. When they step on the pressure plate, boom, 2-second delay, enough time for them to realize they're already dead. They planted 8 mines in a semicircle around the cabin's front approach. Ryan the tracker found an old hunting rifle in Elena's closet. "When's the last time you fired this?" "3 months ago," Elena said. "Missed a deer. Haven't had meat since, monsieur." Ryan checked the action. Loaded 5 rounds. "You won't miss tonight." By the time they finished, it was dark. 10 p.m., they were ready. At 10:15, the first howl split the night. It wasn't a normal howl. It was deep guttural, meant to instill terror. It came from the east tree line. Then another answered from the west. They were surrounded. "Garrett didn't send a squad," Ryan murmured, peering through a crack in the window boards. "He sent a platoon. At least 20 shifters out there. 20 fully transformed, bloodthirsty wolves against 10 weakened men in human form and 1 dormant Omega with a crossbow." "Hold the choke points," Darius ordered, his voice low and steady. He stood in the center of the room holding a heavy felling axe Elena used for firewood. "They can only come through the doors and windows. Bottle them up, bleed them out." He turned to Elena. "Get in the loft, stay down. Do not fire unless they breach the room." "I can fight," she argued, gripping the crossbow. "You are the only thing in this room I care about losing." Darius growled, the violet in his eyes flaring. "Get in the loft." The intensity of his tone hit her with physical force. It wasn't just a king commanding a subject, it was something primal. She scrambled up the ladder to the sleeping loft just as the front door exploded inward. The sofa groaned under the impact but held. Snarls and furious barking erupted from outside. Massive claws tore at the wood. "Now!" Darius roared. Flint leaned out a side window and threw something into the darkness. A Molotov cocktail made from Elena's high-proof rubbing alcohol. It burst against the snow, illuminating 3 massive wolves trying to flank the cabin. One of them caught fire, yelping and rolling in the snow, disrupting their formation. But the front door was failing. With a deafening crack, the hinges gave way. The sofa was shoved aside by sheer brute force. A gray wolf the size of a grizzly bear lunged through the doorway. It never touched the ground. Darius moved with speed that defied his weakened state. He swung the felling axe in a tight arc, burying the blade deep into the wolf's shoulder. The beast screamed a horrific human-like sound and collapsed. "Hold the line!" Darius shouted, wrenching the axe free as 2 more wolves poured over their fallen comrade. The cabin descended into chaos. It was brutal close-quarters melee. The guards, unable to shift because of the lingering toxin and the cramped space, fought like berserkers. Knives, spears, fire pokers, blood sprayed the walls, furniture was smashed to kindling. From the loft, Elena watched in horror. It was a meat grinder. She saw Caleb go down, a wolf clamping its jaws onto his forearm. She saw Flint stab a wolf through the eye with a kitchen knife, the blade sinking in until only the handle was visible. Then she saw the biggest wolf yet, a russet-colored monster with foam around its mouth. It bypassed the fight entirely and leaped onto the ladder leading to the loft. It had smelled her. The wolf snarled, its yellow eyes locking onto Elena as it began to climb, each rung creaking under its weight. Elena raised the crossbow. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely aim. "Breathe," she told herself, "just like Flint taught you. Between the eyes. Exhale slow." The wolf reached the top rung, its jaws snapping inches from her boots, saliva dripping. She could smell its breath, rotting meat and blood. Thwack! The bolt flew straight and true. It embedded itself deep in the wolf's throat, punching through the trachea and severing the carotid artery. The beast made a gurgling sound. Blood fountained from the wound. It fell backward off the ladder, crashing onto the coffee table below. The table splintered under the impact. Darius looked up, seeing the kill. His eyes met hers for a split second, a look of fierce pride. Then he turned back to the slaughter. The battle lasted 20 minutes. It felt like hours. It ended when Darius, bleeding from 3 different wounds, grabbed the alpha of the attacking pack by the scruff and threw him bodily through the living room window. Glass exploded outward. The alpha landed 15 feet away in the snow, its back broken. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader destroyed and the cabin floor littered with the corpses of their kin, broke and ran. They retreated into the dark woods, howling in defeat. Silence fell again, broken only by heavy breathing and the groans of the wounded. The cabin was destroyed. Blood soaked the rugs Elena's grandmother had braided. The door was hanging off its hinges. 5 dead wolves lay on the floor, their bodies already starting to shift back to human form in death. Darius leaned against the mantelpiece, his chest heaving. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own. He looked up at the loft. "Elena," he called out, his voice ragged. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, peering over the edge. "Good," Darius said. Then his eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed to the floor. The adrenaline crash was brutal. Elena scrambled down the ladder, nearly falling in her haste. Flint checked the king. The living room was a scene from a nightmare. Caleb's ear had been bitten completely off, blood streaming down the side of his head. Ryan's ribs were punctured, his breathing wet and labored. Flint had a gash across his chest that exposed muscle. But Darius was the worst. 3 deep stab wounds, one in his thigh, one in his side, one across his shoulder. He'd lost at least 2 liters of blood. Flint pressed his fingers to Darius's neck. Pulse is weak but steady. He's in shock. Elena rushed to the kitchen sink, grabbing clean towels and her medical kit. Her hands were shaking, covered in blood from checking Ryan's wounds. "I'm fine," Darius grunted, his eyes fluttering open. He tried to push himself up, failed. "You're not fine. You're bleeding all over my last clean rug," Elena snapped, dropping to her knees beside him with a basin of warm water and antiseptic. "Report," Darius demanded, ignoring her. 5 hostiles KIA inside." Flint set his voice tight with pain. "At least 3 wounded outside. Our side, Caleb's ear is gone. Ryan has broken ribs, possible punctured lung. Everyone else has superficial wounds." "We got lucky," Darius muttered. "It wasn't luck," Flint said, his eyes drifting to Elena. "We had home field advantage." Elena tried to ignore their stares as she worked. She cut away Darius's blood-soaked shirt. Every time her skin brushed his, that electric jolt zapped through her. It was getting stronger. It wasn't just static. It was a hum in her blood, a magnetic pull that made her want to lean closer to breathe in his scent. Cedar and ozone before a storm, and something uniquely male. "This is going to sting," she warned, uncapping the antiseptic. She poured it over the claw marks on his ribs. Darius didn't even flinch. His muscles jumped hard as granite under her hands, but he made no sound. He just watched her face. "Why did you save me?" he asked quietly. The other men were busy tending to each other on the far side of the room, giving them privacy. "I told you," Elena murmured, concentrating on stitching the wound. "I thought you were dogs." "You're lying," Darius said. He reached out, his large calloused hand covering hers, stopping her work. The jolt was intense. Elena gasped, trying to pull away, but his grip was firm. "You felt the pull out in the snow," Darius whispered, his violet eyes boring into hers, "before you even knew what I was. You felt it when you touched my fur." "I don't know what you're talking about," Elena whispered, her heart hammering. "Don't lie to your king, Elena." His voice dropped an octave, vibrating through her bones. "You feel the static. You smell my scent. You feel the need to be close to me right now, even though you should be terrified." Elena ripped her hand away, scrambling backward. "No, that's impossible. I'm dormant. My wolf never woke up. I don't get a mate." It was her deepest shame. In werewolf society, being dormant was worse than being human. It meant you were broken, defective. That's why Silver River had exiled her. She was useless for breeding, useless for fighting. "You are not dormant," Darius said, shifting so he was leaning toward her. "Your wolf is sleeping. There's a difference. And she's waking up right now because she recognizes her other half." "Stop it," Elena pleaded, tears pricking her eyes. "Don't say that. You're the Alpha King. You need a powerful female. A Luna from a strong bloodline. I'm a hermit living in a shack." Darius let out a low, dry chuckle that turned into a groan of pain. "Elena, look around you. You just defended this shack against a kill squad. You dragged my carcass through a blizzard. You put a crossbow bolt through a shifter's throat without blinking. There isn't a stronger female in my entire kingdom." He reached out again, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He cupped the side of her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone. The heat from his hand was intoxicating. "The moon goddess does not make mistakes," he whispered. "You are mine, Elena Cross, and I am yours. The bond has snapped into place. There's no fighting it." Elena leaned into his touch, despite herself. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen, but reality crashed back in. "They'll come back," she whispered. "Victor won't stop. And now he knows I'm helping you. He'll burn the whole mountain down." Darius's expression hardened. The tenderness vanished, replaced by cold resolve. "Yes, he will," Darius agreed. He winced as he sat up fully. "Which is why we aren't staying here. We leave at first light." "Leave, go where?" Elena asked. "To take back my kingdom," Darius said. "But first we go to the blood caves." The guards stopped what they were doing. A hush fell over the room. The blood caves were legend. Sacred ground where the first alphas were made. No one had gone there in a century. "The caves will heal us," Darius continued. "Forceful shifts. And for you," he looked at Elena, "they'll wake your wolf." My wolf is dead, Elena said automatically, the words the pack doctor had drilled into her. The doctors were idiots, Darius growled. He pulled something from around his neck, a silver ring on a leather cord. My father gave me this when I was 16. It's protected Blackwood Kings for 300 years. He placed it in Elena's palm. The metal was warm, impossibly warm. Now it protects my queen, Darius said. Before Elena could protest, a sound cut through the night, mechanical, high-pitched. A drone. It hovered outside the broken window, its camera lens focusing on the carnage inside. A speaker crackled to life. Victor's voice poured out smooth and mocking. Impressive cousin, I underestimated you. And your little pet Omega. But dawn comes in 4 hours. Surrender by then or I behead your sister Lydia on a live stream. Your move, King. The drone's camera zoomed in on Darius's face. Then it rose into the night sky and disappeared. Darius stood swaying slightly from blood loss. But his voice was iron. We march in 1 hour. Pack everything you can carry. We're going to the caves and then... His violet eyes blazed. Then we're going to war. Elena looked at the photo Garrett had thrown at her feet earlier. She picked it up. A young woman, 19 maybe, with Darius's black hair and violet eyes. Chained to a wall, bruised, terrified. Lydia Blackwood. We save her first, Elena said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. Before the war, we save your sister. Darius looked at her. Something resembling wonder crossed his face. Yes, he said quietly. We save her first. He turned to his men. You heard the queen. 1 hour, then we move. The guards didn't question it. They simply nodded and began gathering supplies. Elena stared at the ring in her hand. The silver seemed to pulse with heat, as if it recognized her. She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Outside, the temperature dropped to -42 degrees. The second blizzard of the night was rolling in, but inside Elena's chest something was warming, stirring. Deep in the darkness where her wolf had slept for 24 years, something opened one silver eye and smiled. The trek to the Blood Caves was 18 miles of frozen hell. They left the ruined cabin at 4 in the morning under cover of darkness and falling snow. 11 warriors and 1 Omega moving through terrain that killed experienced hikers every winter. The temperature had dropped to -42 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 5 minutes. Frostbite becomes inevitable. Hypothermia becomes a race against time. Darius was weakening. The blood loss from his wounds had left him pale and shaking. The residual toxin in his system was still blocking his ability to shift. Without his wolf form, he was vulnerable to the cold in a way he hadn't been since childhood. Elena walked beside him, her shoulder wedged under his arm, taking as much of his weight as her small frame could handle. Lean on me, she ordered, for the 10th time as Darius stumbled over a buried root. I'm fine, Darius gritted out, his face pale, beaded with cold sweat. His pride was the only thing stiffer than his frozen joints. You're about to fall face first into a snowbank. Your Majesty, Elena snapped, grabbing his arm and hauling it over her shoulder, and I don't have the energy to dig you out again. So shut up and lean. Behind them, the 10 royal guards exchanged looks. No one had ever spoken to Darius Blackwood this way. Not as generals, not as council, certainly not an Omega. But Darius accepted her support, leaning his massive weight against her slight frame, and the guards realized something had shifted. The hierarchy of the pack was dissolving into something more primal. Survival. They walked in formation. Flint at point breaking trail through the waist-deep snow. Ryan at rear guard walking backward to cover their tracks with a pine branch. Caleb, despite missing his ear, carried the medical supplies. The others took turns supporting the wounded. Twice they heard the high-pitched whine of surveillance drones circling the valley floor. Each time the group dove into dense pine thickets, holding their breath, waiting for the electronic buzz to fade. They were being hunted in their own territory. We won't make it to the caves before nightfall, Flint whispered, checking the sun's position. If the temperature drops another 10 degrees, the king's heart rate is going to bottom out. He has no body fat left to burn. Elena looked up at Darius. His violet eyes were glassy, unfocused. He was running on fumes and sheer will. We make it, Elena said, her voice fierce. We don't stop. If he falls, we carry him. It took them 9 hours and 47 minutes of grueling trekking. They climbed ridges that sliced their hands raw, slid down ravines that threatened to break ankles. Twice they triggered small avalanches that nearly buried them. At one point, a helicopter searchlight swept across the valley below them. Victor's forces, hunting. Flint pulled a small brick of C4 from his pack, old mining explosive he'd salvaged from Elena's shed. He placed it on the hillside above the helicopter's position and detonated it remotely. The avalanche was massive, 800 cubic meters of snow and ice thundering down the mountain. It buried 3 snowmobiles and forced the helicopter to retreat. But the explosion also cost them. The concussion triggered a secondary slide that swept Ryan off his feet. He tumbled 30 feet down the slope, landing hard. When they dug him out, his ribs were worse. Punctured lung now fully collapsed. His breathing was wet, gurgling. "Keep moving," Ryan rasped, coughing blood. "Don't stop for me." "We don't leave our own," Darius said, his voice barely a whisper. He was fading fast. Caleb and Flint fashioned a makeshift stretcher from pine branches and Elena's torn jacket. They carried Ryan the rest of the way. By the time they reached Mount Moriah, the sun had vanished. The world was a wash of dark blues and blacks. The frozen waterfall loomed ahead, a 90-foot curtain of suspended ice glowing faintly in the moonlight. "There," Darius rasped, pointing with a shaking hand. Behind the waterfall, hidden in shadow, was a fissure in the rock face, the entrance to the blood caves. They squeezed through the opening one by one. It was tight, only 6 inches wide in places. The rocks scraped their coats. But once through, the temperature changed immediately. The tunnel was warm, humid. It smelled of sulfur, wet iron, and ozone. Thunderstorm trapped underground. "Keep moving," Flint urged. "The heat means we're close." The tunnel opened into a cavern that stole the breath from Elena's lungs. It was a cathedral of natural stone, the ceiling lost in darkness hundreds of feet above. Stalactites hung down, dripping mineral water that had been falling for millennia. But the light didn't come from above. It came from below. In the center of the cavern lay a massive circular pool 40 feet in diameter. The water wasn't blue or clear. It was a deep glowing crimson, illuminated from within by phosphorescent minerals and geothermal heat. It cast long, dancing red shadows against the walls. The room was lit by living blood. "The blood of the earth," Caleb whispered, falling to his knees in reverence. "I thought it was just a story." "It's real," Darius said, his voice stronger now, as if the mere air of the cave was feeding him. "This place sits on a ley line of pure magic. The minerals in the water accelerate cellular regeneration by a factor of 50. It forces the spirit and the flesh to merge." The guards wasted no time. They stripped off their ruined tactical gear and waded into the shallows. Almost instantly, their groans of pain turned into sighs of relief. Wounds began to knit together. Broken bones realigned with audible cracks. The water was healing them in real time. Ryan was carried into the pool. Within minutes, his collapsed lung reinflated. His color returned. Darius didn't join them immediately. He turned to Elena. She was standing by a rock formation, hugging herself, looking small and out of place in this hall of warrior legends. "I'll wait here," she said, staring at the floor. This place is for wolves, for warriors. I'm just the dormant girl who drove the sled." Darius walked over to her. He didn't look like a broken refugee anymore. The red light cast him as something ancient and powerful. But his touch was gentle as he began to unbutton her heavy parka. "You're not waiting here," he said. "Darius, I can't," she argued, pushing his hands away weakly. "I know what this place does. It forces a shift. It draws out the wolf. If I get in that water, nothing will happen. I'll just be empty again." "The doctors were wrong," Darius growled. He stripped off his tattered shirt, revealing the map of scars and fresh wounds on his torso. "You felt the bond. You felt the spark. You are not empty. You're barricaded." He took her hand. "Trust me. Please." It was the please that broke her. The king didn't beg. She allowed him to help her out of the heavy coats and boots. She kept her thermal leggings and undershirt on, feeling incredibly vulnerable. They stepped into the water together. The heat was shocking. It wasn't just hot water. It felt like stepping into liquid electricity. The water was viscous, heavy, clinging to her skin. It swirled around her waist, then her chest. Darius pulled her deeper to the center of the pool where the red glow was brightest. The water lapped at their chins. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. They floated together, her head resting on his shoulder. "Close your eyes," he whispered into her ear. "Don't try to think. Don't try to find the wolf. Just feel me." Elena closed her eyes. She felt the heat of the water, the hotter heat of Darius's body, the steady thumping rhythm of his heart against her back. Then Darius did something forbidden. He dropped his mental barriers. He didn't just open a mind link. He flooded her with his alpha aura, the full weight of his power. Usually an alpha uses this power to force submission, to command obedience. But Darius wasn't pushing her down. He was pouring himself into her, feeding her, jump-starting something that had been dormant for too long. Raw voltage surged through her veins, Darius, Elena gasped, arching her back. Water splashed around them. It hurts. I know, he soothed, holding her tighter. I'm jump-starting your heart. I'm feeding her energy. She's been asleep for 24 years. She needs a wake-up call. There's nothing there, Elena cried. The energy was too much. It was burning through her veins, scorching her nervous system. Stop it, you're hurting me. Look for her, Darius roared, his voice echoing off the cavern walls. Stop believing the lies they told you. Look inside. Elena screamed, a guttural sound of pure agony. And then she felt it. Not a heartbeat. A scratch. A claw raking against the inside of her soul. Something deep in the dark, locked basement of her subconscious kicked the door down. Suddenly, Elena wasn't in the pool anymore. She was in her own mind. A dark basement. Prison bars on the windows. Chains on the walls. Memories attacked her from the shadows. The packed doctor's cold voice. Defective. Broken. Useless. The sound of the kennel door slamming. The taste of table scraps. The laughter of pack members as she tried and failed to shift. You're nothing, the memories hissed. You're empty. You don't deserve to exist. But at the end of the basement was a door. Heavy oak, iron bindings, and from underneath it, white fire was leaking out. The wood was charring, smoking. Elena walked toward it, each step heavier than the last. The memories clawed at her, trying to drag her back. You're too weak to open it, they whispered. You'll die if you wake her up. Elena reached the door, placed her hand on the scorching wood. I've been dying for 24 years, she said. I'm done being afraid. She kicked the door. The hinges exploded off the frame. The door disintegrated into ash, and the white wolf burst out. It was massive, bigger than a house. Its fur was pure white, glowing with captured starlight. Its eyes were liquid silver, burning with the intensity of suns. The wolf's presence was overwhelming. It didn't feel like a separate entity. It felt like Elena's own rage crystallized into physical form. Every humiliation, every beating, every whispered insult, all of it compressed into a predator that could tear the world apart. The wolf spoke. Its voice was tectonic plates grinding together. They called you broken. I am wrath. They called you weak. I am annihilation. They caged you. I am freedom. I am not your wolf. You are my human, and together, we are Luna. The wolf's form began to dissolve, not disappearing, merging, flowing into Elena in molten silver, pouring into a mold. In the physical realm, the water around Elena and Darius began to boil violently, not from heat but from vibration. Raw power radiating from Elena's body. Her eyes snapped open. The brown iris was gone. Her eyes were pure liquid silver glowing with molten metal. A shockwave of silver light, it exploded outward from her chest. It was so powerful it knocked all 10 guards unconscious. They collapsed on the cavern floor, their bodies unable to withstand the pressure. Darius stayed conscious, but barely. He fell to his knees in the water, still holding Elena. His alpha resistance was the only thing keeping him from passing out. Above the pool, a form began to manifest out of light and mist. The white wolf, Elena's spirit animal, made visible. It was translucent, shimmering 12 feet tall at the shoulder, 18 feet from nose to tail. Its fur seemed to be made of captured moonlight, semi-transparent and glowing. When it opened its eyes, the silver light was blinding. The guards who were still conscious shielded their eyes, crying out in pain. The spirit wolf threw its head back and howled. The sound was impossible. 160 decibels, loud enough to rupture eardrums. The stalactites above shattered, raining down 47 tons of rock into the pool. The cave walls cracked. Then something even more impossible happened. The cave ceiling split open, not from structural damage, from something else, something divine. Through the crack, the full moon became visible. Impossibly bright, it shouldn't have been visible at all. They were hundreds of feet underground, and it was barely past sunset outside, but there it was. A moonbeam lanced down through the opening, a spotlight of pure silver light that illuminated Elena's floating form. And then she appeared. The moon goddess, 20 feet tall, silver skin, white dress that seemed woven from starlight itself. Her eyes were ancient, holding the weight of millennia. Her voice filled the cavern, layered, echoing. The sound of 1,000 women speaking in unison. Behold the silver Luna reborn, the bloodline thought extinct, the daughter of Aria, the queen of wolves. Bow before your Luna. In the corner of his cavern, a stone statue of a wolf that had been there for 500 years suddenly moved. Its head turned, its stone eyes glowed silver. It lowered its head in a bow. The light began to fade. The moon goddess dissolved back into pure moonlight. The spirit wolf collapsed back into Elena's body. Elena went limp in Darius's arms. He caught her, cradling her against his chest. Her physical form had changed. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, had permanent silver flecks in the brown. Her gangrenous arm, the one that had been blackened with frostbite, was now perfect. New pink skin, the 2 fingers she'd lost were fully regrown. Bone, muscle, nail, all of it. Her height had increased. She'd been 5'4". Now she was 5'7". Her bones had lengthened. Her weight had shifted. The starvation thin frame had filled out with pure muscle. 107 pounds to 118. Elena, Darius whispered, brushing wet hair from her face. His hand was trembling. Can you hear me? Her eyes opened fully. The silver flecks caught the light. I'm not broken, she whispered, her voice raspy but strong. Broken. Darius laughed, a sound of pure relief. Elena, you are the rarest creature on this continent. A silver Luna. The perfect balance to a black alpha. The moon goddess didn't just give me a mate. She gave me a nuclear weapon. He lifted her out of the pool, carrying her to a pile of dry furs the guards had laid out. She was shaking. Not from cold, from power. It was coursing through her veins. I can smell them, Elena said suddenly, her eyes widening. Victor's forces, 84 wolves, 30 miles away, moving this direction. Darius stared at her. You can smell them from 30 miles. I can smell everything, Elena whispered. She looked at her hands. They were steady. The constant tremor from malnutrition was gone. I can hear their heartbeats. I can taste their fear on the wind. She looked at Caleb, who was sitting by the pool's edge, his hand pressed to where his ear used to be. Come here, Elena said. Caleb approached hesitantly. Elena reached out and touched the side of his head. Silver light flowed from her palm. Caleb gasped, his eyes going wide. The ear regrew. Cartilage formed first, then skin, then the delicate inner structures. 40 seconds from nothing to complete. Caleb stumbled backward, touching his new ear in disbelief. How? I don't know, Elena said, but I can feel it. The power, it's not just strength, it's healing, regeneration. She walked to a boulder near the cave wall. 600 pounds of solid granite. She placed both hands on it and lifted. The boulder rose off the ground, not from muscle, from telekinesis. It floated 8 feet into the air, then compressed. The granite crumbled to dust in midair. The guards stared in silent awe and terror. You're not just a Luna, Flint breathed. You're a weapon. Darius stepped forward. He took Elena's face in his hands. You're my queen first, weapon second. He turned to address his men. We have until dawn. Victor's coronation is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. in Capitol Hall. We infiltrate during the ceremony, expose his betrayal, rescue Lydia and Emma before we strike. What about the 84 wolves heading this way? Ryan asked. Elena's eyes flashed silver. Let them come. I'll handle it. No, Darius said firmly. We don't fight unless we have to. We're still outnumbered and you're untested. We move fast, stay quiet, and strike when they're not expecting it. He reached into a pack and pulled out a woven crown of silver vines. It had been in his family for generations, meant for the Luna Queen. He placed it on Elena's head. The moment it touched her hair, white flowers bloomed along the vines. Impossible. Beautiful. I pledge my life, my kingdom, my soul to you, Elena Cross. Darius said, his voice ringing through the cavern. Luna Queen of the Western Territories. My mate, my equal, my everything. Elena's breath caught. She reached up, touching the crown. It felt warm, alive. I pledge my strength, my fury, my heart to you, Darius Blackwood, she said, her voice steady and strong. My AlphaKing, my mate, my partner in war and peace. The bond between them sealed, a visible burst of light, silver and violet intertwining. It was so bright it lit up the entire cave for 3 full seconds. When the light faded, every guard in the cavern was on their knees, heads bowed. Long live the king and queen, they said in unison. Darius helped Elena to her feet. Can you shift? Elena closed her eyes, felt for the wolf inside her. It was there, wide awake, eager. Her bones began to crack. Not painfully, naturally. Her body knew what to do now. Fur sprouted, white, pure as fresh snow. Her snout lengthened, her spine extended. Within 34 seconds, she stood on 4 legs. A white wolf, 8 feet tall at the shoulder, 600 pounds of muscle and power. Her fur seemed to glow with its own internal light. Her eyes were silver suns. Around her, grass began to grow through the cracks in the stone floor. Impossible, but happening. Her presence was bringing life to dead rock. Darius shifted next. The massive black alpha, 9 feet tall, 700 pounds, violet eyes blazing. They stood side by side, black and white, shadow and light, king and queen. The other 10 guards shifted, wolves of gray-brown rust and tan. They formed up behind their leaders. Darius threw back his head and howled, a deep, resonant sound that echoed for miles. Elena joined him. Her howl was higher, harmonizing with his. The two sounds merged into something beautiful and terrible. 30 miles away in a temporary camp, 84 of Victor's wolves heard the howl. 12 of them collapsed immediately, their hearts stopping from pure supernatural fear. The rest whimpered and retreated. In Capitol Hall, Victor Thornwell was rehearsing his coronation speech. The doors burst open. Garrett Stone stumbled in, his face pale. "She's alive," Garrett gasped. "And she's a white wolf, a God's damned silver Luna." Victor's wineglass shattered in his hand. Blood dripped from his palm, mixing with the wine. "Impossible," Victor hissed. "They're extinct. We killed them all." "She's real, and she's with Darius. They're coming." Victor stood, his eyes glowing yellow with rage. "Then we don't wait for them to come to us. Assemble the hunters, silver bullets, wolfsbane bombs, mobilize every wolf we have. If I can't have this throne, I'll burn the whole kingdom down before I let Darius take it back." He looked at the photo of Lydia chained in the dungeon. "And execute the girl. Now, stream it. Let Darius watch his sister die." Garrett hesitated. "Sir, if we kill her, Darius will—" "I don't care," Victor roared. "Do it!" But in the dungeons below Capitol Hall, something was happening. The chains holding Lydia Blackwood were beginning to rust, corroding impossibly fast. A silver aura was seeping through the stone walls, Elena's power radiating across 30 miles. The chains shattered. Lydia fell to the floor free. In the next cell, 7-year-old Emma Sullivan's chains also broke. Lydia looked at the rusted metal in wonder. Then she heard it, faint but unmistakable. Her brother's howl, and another voice, a female, powerful, pure. Lydia smiled. "He's coming, and he's bringing the queen." Back in the blood caves, the pack of 12 wolves stood at the cavern entrance. The moon was fully risen now, full and bright. They stepped out into the snow, and they began to run. 12 wolves racing through the night, faster than any vehicle could follow. The white wolf and the black alpha at the front running side by side. They had 30 miles to cover, and a kingdom to reclaim. The hunt had begun. 30 miles vanished beneath their paws in 2 hours. They moved as one shadow across the snow, their breath steaming in the frozen air. The white wolf and the black alpha led the pack, their forms barely visible against the landscape except for the glow of silver and violet eyes. They reached the outskirts of Capitol Hall at dawn. The building loomed ahead, all stone and iron and Gothic spires crawling with Victor's bard. But Elena's silver aura preceded them in an invisible wave. Guards on the outer perimeter collapsed. Their weapons rusted in their hands, metal corroding as if aged 1,000 years in seconds. The massive iron gates swung open, their hinges turning to dust. The dungeons were beneath the main hall. Darius and Elena shifted back to human form, clothed now in the royal garments they'd carried in packs. The guards followed suit, weapons drawn. They descended the stone steps. No alarms, no resistance. Elena's power was a tide washing through the building, disrupting everything in its path. The dungeon doors exploded open before they reached them. Lydia stood in the corridor, Emma clinging to her hand. Both were bruised thin, but alive. Free. Lydia's violet eyes met Darius's. She didn't run. She walked forward with dignity, her head high despite everything she'd endured. "Brother," she said simply. Darius pulled her into a fierce embrace. No words were needed. The reunion was silent tears and fierce grips. Ryan dropped to his knees as Emma ran to him. "Daddy!" The 7-year-old threw herself into his arms, sobbing. "I'm here, baby," Ryan whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here. You're safe now." Elena watched the reunions, feeling the mate bond pulse with Darius's emotions. Relief, rage, love. Then they went inside. The throne room was packed. 500 wolves bearing witness to what they thought would be Victor's coronation. The usurper stood at the altar, crown in hand, dressed in royal robes that didn't belong to him. The massive oak doors blew open. Silver light flooded the hall so bright that those nearest the entrance cried out, shielding their eyes. Elena and Darius walked in side by side. Human form, crowned, radiant. The 10 royal guards flanked them, Lydia and Emma safe in the center. The crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled through the hall. "The king lives. Impossible. Who is she? Look at her eyes, silver. This coronation." Darius's voice rang out, carrying to every corner of the vast hall. Is over, Victor snarled, his human facade cracking. You should be dead. But I'm not, Darius said, walking down the center aisle. The crowd parted before him. Thanks to her, he gestured to Elena, the moon goddess herself has blessed this union. The silver Luna has returned. Victor's eyes widened, then narrowed with hate. The silver Lunas are extinct. I made sure of it myself. The admission hung in the air. Gasps from the crowd. You, an elderly wolf in the front row, stood. You were involved in the massacre of 1922. My grandfather was, Victor spat, and he was right to do it. Those freaks had too much power, just like this one. He shifted, a massive brown wolf larger than most alphas. He lunged across the altar, jaws aimed at Elena's throat. He never reached her. Elena raised one hand. Silver light lanced out like a physical thing. Victor froze mid-leap, suspended in the air, paralyzed by her power. The crowd stared in stunned silence. The moon goddess has spoken, Elena said, her voice carrying the same layered quality it had in the cave, as if the goddess spoke through her. Your rule ends now, Victor Thornwell. You poisoned your king. You murdered innocents. You defiled the throne. The ancient stone wolf statue at the side of the throne room, twin to the one in the blood caves, suddenly moved. Its head turned. Stone eyes glowed silver. It lowered its massive head in a bow to Elena. Divine validation, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, some knelt, some wept. What is your judgment, my queen? Darius asked formally. Elena looked at Victor, still frozen in her grasp. She thought of the kennels, the beatings, the starvation, every Omega who'd suffered under corrupt alphas. Exile, she said, to the frozen wastes, naked, alone, exactly as he condemned others. She released her power. Victor dropped to the floor, shifting back to human form. Guards seized him immediately. No, Victor screamed. No, you can't. I'm royalty. You're nothing, Elena said quietly, just like you told me I was. They dragged him out. His screams echoed through the hall until the doors slammed shut. 6 days later, rangers would find his frozen corpse 40 miles north of Capitol Hall. Poetic justice. The coronation that should have been Victor's became theirs. Elena and Darius were crowned king and queen before 5,000 wolves who packed the hall and the grounds outside. The ceremony was broadcast across all territories. When the twin crowns were placed, silver for Elena, black for Darius, the bond between them flared so bright that cameras couldn't capture it. A pillar of silver and violet light shot into the sky, visible for 100 miles. In the front row, Lydia held Emma's hand. Both free, both safe, both crying happy tears. Elena looked out at the sea of faces, thousands of wolves all watching her. Some with awe, some with fear, but none with the contempt she'd seen in the Silver River Pack's eyes. Once she'd been nothing, broken, exiled, caged. Now she was everything. Darius took her hand, their fingers intertwining. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger than ever. Are you ready for this? He murmured. Elena thought of the 2 years of loneliness, the cabin, the blizzard, the 11 dying wolves, the impossible journey that had led to this moment. I've been ready my whole life, she said. I just didn't know it. She turned to the crowd and spoke her first decree as queen. No Omega will ever be exiled from my territories for being dormant. No wolf will sleep in kennels or eat scraps. We protect the weak. We honor the different. Because I was the weakest among you, and look what the moon goddess made of me. The crowd roared approval. Darius pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. My fierce little queen, he whispered. Your terrifying weapon, she corrected with a smile. That too. As the sun set on their first day as crowned rulers, Elena stood on the balcony overlooking the kingdom. Darius came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Do you miss it? He asked. The quiet, the cabin. Elena thought about it, the solitude, the peace. Then she felt the pulse of the pack bond, not just Darius, but the 10 guards, Lydia, Emma, and the thousands of wolves in the territories who were now hers to protect. No, she said honestly. I was surviving then. Now I'm living. Somewhere in the mountains, the Blackwood Ridge cabin still stood. Empty now, but not forgotten. And in the blood caves, the crimson pool glowed in the darkness, waiting for the next lost soul who needed to find their strength. The silver Luna had returned, and the kingdom would never be the same.